Hey guys, welcome to the video. John Bodine here with Redemptive Psych. Today we're talking about the next of the typing vectors, that of systematic versus interest. We have this one and then we have the last one, outcome and progression. Now, admittedly I have been procrastinating on this video because I have a challenging relationship with this vector. I think it's just something about it just feels off. The best way I can describe it is that all the other vectors, I think all 5 of them, have an equivalency. They're like 180s from each other. Like we can see how, being abstract is equivalent and opposite to being concrete. How being directive and more direct in your communication is the opposite of being informing and informative. Systematic and interest, where the other vectors are like this, I feel like systematic is like this, and then interest is like this. It's not quite the opposite. So my intuition tells me that there's something, another word or another concept that's closer aligned to the opposite. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So I think this vector is one-sided, more so. Mercer and I talked about this in our tier list ranking video of the typing vectors. He talked about how he loads systematic when he's typing others. This means that you look for systematic types, and then if you see that they are not systematic, then they're probably interest. Meaning that it's hard to just discern interest in of its own right, except for extreme cases. I was talking about this to my wife, and she's not big into this space, but we were talking about the vector. And after a few minutes, she was like, well, I could see how some people would be systematic, but I can't see the other one. And that is evidence that she's picking up on the same thing that someone who studied this for years has, is that this vector is front-loaded, meaning that we can discern one side of it when it's obvious, but not as much the other side. It's harder to discern interest-based. Again, I feel like there's something missing here. It's not to say that I think Linda Barron's work here is bad, like we all stand on her shoulders here. I just feel like this vector in particular, there's just something missing to it. Now, she modified the language here a bit in her own suggestion later, which was instead of systematic, it's structure. Instead of interest, it's motive. And I think this is a bit clearer, but I don't necessarily think it's better. However, I will say, and I've been saying this for a bit, that I think interest-based types do not like this vector as much, and I am an interest-based types. The systematic types seem to value this vector a lot more. And it seems, I don't know exactly why, perhaps it's because they can perceive like-minded systematic types better, and myself, with low TE and low SI, being systematic doesn't exactly make sense to me. There are things here that are just quite skewed a little bit and not equivalent. So I think this vector, of all the 6, I think this one stands some ground to be improved with time. So like with the other vectors, asking ourselves some questions here is important. Are these emergent or fundamental? I have talked about in typing sessions with some of you. I have said that if you're just relying on the vectors to type people, you're going to probably get yourself in trouble. They are powerful, they're very strong, but you have to remember that most of these vectors are emergent qualities from something else. And if you're only looking at the smoke, then sometimes you're going to be wrong about what's underneath it, okay? So keep that in mind. Most of these are not exactly fundamental, but emergent. Primary or secondary, everyone has access to both of these traits, right? It's just what do we lead with? What is our secondary one? Some types are closer to the middle and switch sides in a behavioral sense more easily. Okay, so the types who are systematic are all the guardians and the rationals, the SJs and the NTs, and then all the interest-based types are the artisan types, the SPs, and the idealists, all the NFs. Now, talking about this vector, let's start with system, being systems-based. What does that mean? This means that if a problem is wrong, if something comes to your attention of like, that's not functioning right, there's an issue there, oh, that must mean that the system, the protocol, the method, the plan that we use to address problems like that is off, is wrong. So we need to go back to the, not the drawing board, but go back to the foundation, the source, the plan, right? and alter that so that the output rather, will fix that problem. It's not necessarily attacking the situation head on at first, okay? These systems-based types value knowing the plan and the goal ahead of time much more, right? They invest more here. Now, the other thing with this vector is that this vector bleeds a little bit into the outcome and progression vector, because there are some overlap traits here, particularly systematic and outcome types. Those, like, systematic types look like outcome types, and vice versa. So we have to keep that in mind. Organization is big for systematic types. Organizing, being able to anticipate what's to come, and then having a plan around that, is the way that they are effective, okay? And they have these different systems, these different plans for different tasks, for different approaches in their lives. And because of this, they are very methodical, okay? The NTJs may get mistyped as SI users here because they have the capacity to be methodical with extroverted thinking. And being methodical, people think of as being an introverted sensing trait. And yes, it tilts more towards that, but not exclusively, okay? So system-based types, they go back to the system, okay? What is the system? What is the protocol? What is the plan here? And if something's wrong, we need to go back to that. There must be a flaw in the plan if something else is going wrong, okay? Now, the interest-based types are a bit different. They have a situational approach, okay? Another word that I would propose that might be better than interest or motive here is benefit, okay? Being aware of, like, benefit analysis. It's not exactly quid pro quo. That's sort of the self-interested side of that. This is the other problem with this vector, with this side of the vector at least, is that it's one step removed from judging all these types, especially the artisans, as being selfish, self-interested people. That is not exactly what interest-based is. So the interest types, the idealists and the artisans, care more about the situation, how that's going to affect, right? How that's going to impact them or others. And this is the missing part here. Being interest-based is not just being interest-based about yourself. A lot of advocates, for example, are NFPs who advocate for other people, who advocate for the benefit, for the interest of other people. Again, what I don't like about this is that immediately you trip over the trait here of, like, what do they get out of it? And what that question, the impact of that question leads to suspicion of, like, oh, they only care about what they get out of it. It's about benefit, it's about who gets what, it's about avoiding being taken advantage of also, okay? Like, when they make a deal, they want to make sure that the deal is good, right? However, again, that example applies to systematic types. If you try and screw over an ENTJ in a business deal, do you think they're not going to be aware of that or have the capacity to sniff that out? So there are some issues there with distinguishing this vector fully. So in the previous typing vector video, I assigned functions along the spectrum of these vectors. And I think it's helpful to get a more precise, zoomed in picture of how these vectors, where these vectors come from, okay? So the most systematic function, okay, of all the people who are systematic, all of the ones who have SI hero or parent, or TE hero or TE parent, are all systematic types, okay? So we can conclude, just based off exclusion, that SI and TE have something to do fundamentally with being systematic. And these functions are also the most methodical. STJs, particularly ISTJs, I would say, are the most methodical, okay? And then the ISFJ and ESFJ are pretty methodical as well. On the other side of it, okay, FI is really the true interest function here, at least for self and interest. All of the types, all of them that are FI hero or FI parent, this is all the FPs, are interest-based types. And even though the ENTJ and INTJ, who are NI users and systematic types, all other 6 NI users are interest-based. So therefore, I put FI and NI just as individual functions that are the interest-based functions. Now, this gets tricky when you're applying it because you see INTJ INTJs who are developed more into the SE and FI, they look more like ISFPs, all right, especially women. So they can look more interest-based. So we have to be aware of not just what the hero and parent are, but where they're developed. If they're developed more into these functions, they're going to take on the capacity for more interest-based. Likewise, if you meet an ENFP who's developed more into their SI and TE, they're going to come across more systematic, because guess what? They are more systematic than an ENFP who's just developed more into their nemesis, okay? So again, there's a dynamic here that's not just static, it's very dynamic. The dynamic is dynamic. Okay, and then kind of in the middle here, I think SE tilts a little bit more towards being interest-based. 6 out of the 8 SE users are interest-based types. 6 out of the 8 NE users are systematic types. I think NE is a little bit more up in the air, but technically the ratios are there. And then lastly, TI and FE, I think these are about as close to the middle between all the functions, but I think TI tilts slightly towards systematic and FE towards interest. It's just FE, when it's used by itself, is more about the group or the collective interest, right, within a situation. Okay, so I am going to be thinking about what this vector needs to be improved, because I think you can use this vector effectively when you stack it, right? If you can tell that they're systematic, then they're systematic. And if they're really not systematic, well, then they're probably the other one. But it's hard to do it the other way around. So my thought at the moment is systematic and situational feels closer. Now, being situationally aware is more of an SP dominant thing, but the NFs are also situational. So it could be there, it could be systematic versus benefit, something like that. I just feel like this vector is just skewed a little bit. So if you agree with me, then if you go to use it, knowing that ahead of time you can use it more effectively, because you know it's not exactly balanced, even though it might be true, or at least has some truth to it. So anyway, guys, that is the 5th vector, systematic versus interest. Hope you guys enjoyed. Share your thoughts down below, and I'll catch you next time.